In 1985, a single-night janitor walked into a Sacramento federal building carrying nothing more than a mop bucket and a master plan that would baffle investigators for 3 decades. By morning, $2.8 million in cash had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only wet floors and empty safes. No alarms sounded, no witnesses came forward, no arrests followed. The case went cold faster than most, buried under stacks of paperwork and assumptions that would prove devastatingly wrong. But in 2015, during the routine demolition of an abandoned maintenance facility on the outskirts of Sacramento, construction workers discovered something that shouldn't have existed. Hidden behind a false wall in what used to be a janitor's supply closet was a sealed metal container, corroded by time but intact. Inside that container lay the first tangible clue to one of California's most perfectly executed inside jobs, a crime so methodical that federal agents once called it impossible to solve. What started as a simple cleaning contract became something far more sophisticated. The missing money had been carefully laundered through a network of shell companies and offshore accounts, each transaction designed to disappear into the legitimate economy without detection. The janitor wasn't working alone, and he wasn't just mopping floors. He was the key to an operation that had been planned for months, executed in minutes, and concealed for decades. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. On the evening of March 15, 1985, the Federal Reserve Processing Center in Sacramento appeared no different than any other night. Located in a nondescript government building on J Street, the facility handled currency transfers and cash deposits from banks across Northern California. Security was considered adequate for the time, with magnetic card access, motion sensors in key areas, and a rotating schedule of armed guards. The building operated on a predictable routine, with most federal employees departing by 6 in the evening, leaving only essential personnel and contracted cleaning staff to maintain the facility overnight. The cleaning contract had been awarded to Valley Maintenance Services 6 months earlier, a small company that specialized in government buildings and had successfully bid on the job with competitive rates and solid references. Their crew consisted of 4 part-time employees who worked different sections of the building on alternating schedules. The night shift supervisor was a man named Robert Castellanos, a 34-year-old former warehouse worker who had been with the company for just over a year. Castellanos had earned a reputation as reliable and thorough. He arrived punctually at 8 p.m. each evening, completed his assigned areas without incident, and left detailed logs of his activities for the building's security coordinator. His background check had revealed no criminal history, and his references from previous employers were uniformly positive. To federal security personnel, he was invisible in the best possible way, a quiet professional who did his job and caused no problems. What no one realized was that Castellanos had been conducting his own security assessment for months. During his nightly rounds, he had carefully observed guard patrol patterns, documented the timing of alarm system cycles, and noted which areas of the building remained unmonitored during specific windows. He had identified the location of surveillance cameras and discovered that several key corridors had blind spots where someone could move undetected. Most importantly, he had gained access to areas that were supposed to be restricted, using his master cleaning credentials to explore sections of the building that contained far more than office furniture. The Federal Reserve Processing Center occupied the 3rd and 4th floors of the building. Currency arrived in armored vehicles during business hours and was stored overnight in a series of reinforced rooms equipped with time-locked safes. The money was sorted, counted, and prepared for distribution to regional banks the following day. On any given night, the facility held between $2 million and $4 million in cash, depending on the day's deposits and scheduled transfers. Castellanos had learned these details not through any single source, but by piecing together fragments of information gathered during months of careful observation. He overheard conversations between federal employees, noticed patterns in armored vehicle arrivals, and observed the procedures used to secure cash at the end of each business day. He also discovered that the time-locked safes, while sophisticated, operated on a backup system that could be manually overridden in case of emergency, a feature that required specific knowledge of the building's security protocols. The plan that emerged was elegant in its simplicity. Rather than attempting to crack safes or disable alarm systems, Castellanos would exploit the one advantage he possessed that no outside thief could replicate: legitimate access to the building and intimate knowledge of its security vulnerabilities. His presence in the building at night was not only expected, but required. His master keycard granted him access to areas that would trigger alarms for anyone else, and his familiarity with guard routines allowed him to predict exactly when he could operate undetected. But Castellanos wasn't working alone. The operation required expertise he didn't possess and resources beyond his means. Through contacts in Sacramento's underground economy, he had connected with two individuals who brought essential skills to the plan. The first was Marcus Webb, a former bank security technician who had been quietly dismissed from his position 2 years earlier, following allegations of tampering with surveillance equipment. Webb understood the technical aspects of the building's security systems and knew how to create temporary malfunctions that would appear accidental. The second conspirator was Elena Vasquez, who operated a small import-export business that served as a front for money laundering activities. Vasquez had established relationships with offshore banking contacts and maintained a network of shell companies that could absorb large cash deposits without triggering federal reporting requirements. Her role was to ensure that once the money was stolen, it could be moved through legitimate financial channels and emerge clean on the other side. The three met regularly over several months, always in different locations and never for longer than necessary. They communicated using coded language and avoided putting any details in writing. Each understood that the success of the operation depended on maintaining absolute secrecy and following the plan exactly as rehearsed. There would be no improvisation, no deviation from established procedures, and no contact between the conspirators once the job was complete. The target date was selected based on federal deposit schedules and guard rotation patterns. March 15th fell on a Friday, which meant the building would hold weekend deposits from several major banks. The following Monday was a federal holiday, which would delay the discovery of any discrepancies and provide additional time for the conspirators to distance themselves from the crime. Most importantly, Castellanos had confirmed that the overnight security would be reduced to a single guard, who followed a predictable patrol route that left the currency storage area unmonitored for approximately 20 minutes every 2 hours. As the date approached, each conspirator made final preparations. Webb obtained the electronic tools needed to temporarily disable specific security sensors without triggering backup alarms. Vasquez arranged for immediate cash deposits into accounts she controlled, ensuring that the stolen money could begin moving through her laundering network within hours of the theft. Castellanos continued his normal routine, maintaining the appearance of a dedicated employee while secretly preparing for the most significant night of his career. The plan they had developed was methodical and precise. It relied not on violence or sophisticated technology, but on insider knowledge and careful timing. Every detail had been considered, every contingency planned for. What they couldn't have anticipated was that their perfect crime would leave behind evidence that would remain hidden for 30 years, waiting in a forgotten supply closet for someone to finally uncover the truth. On the night of March 15, 1985, Robert Castellanos arrived at the Federal Reserve Building at exactly 8:03 p.m., 3 minutes later than his usual schedule. The delay was intentional, calculated to coincide with the security guard's first patrol of the evening. He carried his standard equipment, a wheeled cart loaded with cleaning supplies, trash bags, and industrial-grade floor wax. Hidden beneath a false bottom in the cart were the tools that would transform him from janitor to thief, electronic devices provided by Marcus Webb and carefully concealed within hollowed-out containers of cleaning solution. The building felt different that night, though nothing visible had changed. The same fluorescent lights hummed overhead, the same security cameras tracked their programmed arcs, and the same keycard readers blinked their steady red lights at checkpoint doors. But Castellanos moved with a heightened awareness, each step deliberate and measured. He had rehearsed this night countless times in his mind, visualizing every corridor, every turn, every moment where timing would be critical. He began with his normal routine, cleaning the first-floor offices and common areas while maintaining the appearance of ordinary work. His movements were methodical, professional, giving no indication that anything unusual was about to occur. The security guard, a veteran named David Chen, nodded to him during his 9:15 patrol, just as he had every night for months. Chen had grown accustomed to Castellanos' presence and saw nothing suspicious in the janitor's focused demeanor. At 10:47 p.m., as Chen began his second patrol of the building's perimeter, Castellanos made his move. He rode the service elevator to the third floor, where the Federal Reserve Processing Center occupied a maze of reinforced rooms and secure corridors. His keycard granted him access to the outer areas, where currency was sorted and prepared during business hours. But the real target lay deeper within the facility, behind doors that should have been impenetrable to anyone without federal clearance. This was where Webb's expertise became crucial. Over the preceding weeks, the former security technician had identified a vulnerability in the building's access control system. The magnetic locks on the high-security doors operated on a backup power circuit that could be temporarily disrupted without triggering the main alarm network. The disruption would last only minutes, but it would be enough to allow someone with the right equipment to bypass the locks and gain entry to restricted areas. Castellanos reached into his cleaning cart and retrieved a device no larger than a television remote. Webb had constructed it from components purchased at electronics stores across Sacramento, ensuring that no single purchase would raise suspicions. The device was designed to emit a specific electromagnetic pulse that would overload the backup circuit for exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds, enough time to enter the secure area, access the time-locked safes, and retreat before the system reset itself. He positioned himself outside the main currency storage room and activated Webb's device. The magnetic lock disengaged with a barely audible click, and the heavy steel door swung open to reveal a space that contained more cash than most people would see in a lifetime. Stacks of currency filled metal shelving units, organized by denomination and secured in plastic-wrapped bundles. The money was fresh from the Federal Reserve, crisp bills that would be distributed to banks throughout Northern California the following week. But Castellanos didn't take everything. That would have been amateur hour, the kind of mistake that draws federal attention and launches massive investigations. Instead, he selected specific bundles from different shelves, taking amounts that might not be immediately noticed during routine counts. He focused on larger denominations, 50s and 100s, that would provide maximum value with minimum bulk. Each bundle was carefully chosen to avoid obvious gaps in the storage arrays. The time-locked safes presented a different challenge. These were sophisticated devices designed to remain sealed until predetermined hours, with backup systems that should have made unauthorized access impossible. But Webb had discovered that the safes included an emergency override feature, accessible through a hidden panel that required specific knowledge of the manufacturer's service codes. The feature was intended for use by federal technicians in case of system malfunctions, but it could be exploited by anyone who knew the right sequence of commands. Castellanos located the hidden panel on the largest safe and entered the codes Webb had obtained through contacts in the security industry. The massive door swung open to reveal bundled cash organized in neat stacks, each marked with federal banking codes and destination information. He selected bundles totaling $1.8 million, leaving behind enough money to avoid immediate detection, while still securing a fortune that would change his life forever. The entire operation inside the secure area took less than 4 minutes. As the electromagnetic pulse device automatically deactivated and the magnetic locks reset themselves, Castellanos was already back in the outer corridor with his cart loaded with stolen currency. To anyone observing his movements, he appeared to be nothing more than a janitor finishing his assigned duties and preparing to move to the next section of the building. But the night was far from over. The stolen money now had to be removed from the building without detection, a process that required the same careful planning that had gotten him this far. Castellanos had spent weeks studying the building's exit procedures and security protocols. He knew that his cleaning cart would not be searched as he left, but he also understood that carrying $1.8 million in cash presented logistical challenges that required creative solutions. He made his way to the basement level, where the building's maintenance areas provided privacy and storage space away from security cameras. In a forgotten corner behind the main boiler system, he had prepared a hiding spot months in advance, a section of wall that appeared solid but concealed a hollow space large enough to hold several bundles of currency. This was his insurance policy, a way to temporarily store part of the stolen money while he completed the rest of his plan. Working quickly, he divided the cash into 3 separate caches. The largest portion, nearly $1.2 million, was carefully wrapped in plastic and concealed within his cleaning cart, hidden inside containers that appeared to hold industrial cleaning supplies but had been modified with false bottoms and hidden compartments. The second cache, containing approximately $400,000, was placed in the hollow wall space he had prepared, sealed behind a panel that looked identical to the surrounding concrete blocks. The third and smallest cache presented the greatest risk, but also the most important insurance. Castellanos carried $200,000 in cash to a supply closet on the building's second floor, a cramped space filled with maintenance equipment and rarely visited by anyone other than cleaning staff. Behind a stack of boxes containing floor wax and industrial cleaners, he constructed a hiding place that would remain undisturbed for decades, a metal container welded shut and concealed within the building's infrastructure itself. This final cache wasn't meant to be recovered immediately. It was Castellanos' safety net, evidence that could be retrieved years later if needed, or simply left as a permanent record of his greatest achievement. He sealed the container with documents that detailed the entire operation, including the names of his co-conspirators and the methods used to breach the building's security. It was both confession and insurance policy, protection against betrayal and proof of his role in what he knew would be remembered as one of the most sophisticated inside jobs in federal law enforcement history. By 11:32 p.m., Castellanos had completed the most dangerous phase of his operation, but the night was far from over. The stolen currency was now distributed across 3 carefully chosen locations, each serving a different purpose in his long-term strategy. The largest portion remained with him, concealed within his cleaning cart and ready for immediate extraction. The hidden wall cache would serve as a backup reserve, accessible only to someone who knew exactly where to look. And the supply closet container represented something else entirely, a time capsule that would preserve the truth long after the initial investigation concluded. He resumed his normal cleaning routine, methodically working through the remaining floors of the building while maintaining the appearance of an ordinary night shift. His movements were deliberate but unhurried, giving no indication that anything extraordinary had occurred. The security cameras recorded the same janitor they had observed for months, pushing his cart through familiar corridors and following established patterns that raised no suspicions. At 12:15 a.m., David Chen completed his third patrol of the evening, once again encountering Castellanos in the second-floor administrative area. The two men exchanged their usual brief nod, a routine interaction that would later be cited by investigators as evidence that nothing unusual had been observed during the critical hours of the theft. Chen noted in his security log that all areas appeared normal and that the cleaning staff was proceeding according to schedule. What Chen couldn't have known was that he had just witnessed the final stages of a meticulously planned federal crime. The janitor he passed in the hallway was carrying nearly $1.2 million in stolen currency, concealed within cleaning supplies that would never be searched or questioned. The routine nature of their interaction was precisely what Castellanos had counted on, the invisibility that came with being part of the building's everyday operations. As the night progressed, Castellanos prepared for the most delicate part of his plan, removing the money from the building without triggering any security protocols. His cleaning cart was equipped with hidden compartments that had been tested and refined over months of preparation. The false bottoms were constructed from materials identical to the original containers, ensuring that even close inspection would reveal nothing suspicious. The weight distribution had been carefully calculated to avoid any noticeable difference in how the cart handled during transport. At 2:45 a.m., he completed his assigned cleaning duties and began the process of leaving the building. This was the moment of greatest vulnerability, when months of planning would either succeed or catastrophically fail. He rode the service elevator to the ground floor, pushed his cart through the main corridor, and approached the security checkpoint that separated the federal building from the outside world. The overnight security protocol required all personnel to sign out using their identification cards and submit to a basic verification process. For cleaning staff, this typically involved a cursory check of equipment and a brief review of completed work areas. Castellanos had passed through this checkpoint hundreds of times without incident, and tonight appeared no different. The security officer on duty, a part-time employee named Michael Torres, barely looked up from his paperwork as he processed the departure. Torres scanned Castellanos' identification card, noted the time in his log, and waved him through without inspection. The cleaning cart, loaded with what appeared to be standard maintenance supplies, drew no attention. The routine was so familiar that neither man spoke beyond the basic pleasantries they had exchanged countless times before. Within minutes, Castellanos was outside the building, pushing his cart toward the service area where cleaning crews loaded their equipment into company vehicles. But instead of heading to the Valley Maintenance Services van, Castellanos made a subtle detour. In the parking area behind the building, a nondescript sedan waited with its engine running and headlights off. This was part of the coordination with his co-conspirators, a carefully timed pickup that would allow him to transfer the stolen money without being observed by building security or passing patrol cars. The driver was Elena Vasquez, who had positioned herself according to the predetermined schedule. She had spent the evening monitoring police radio frequencies and tracking the movements of security personnel in the area. Her import-export business provided the perfect cover for unusual nighttime activities, and her presence near the federal building could be explained as routine business operations if questioned by authorities. The transfer took less than 3 minutes. Castellanos removed the modified containers from his cleaning cart and placed them in Vasquez's vehicle, along with detailed instructions for the money laundering operation that would begin immediately. The cash would be divided into smaller amounts and deposited into accounts across multiple financial institutions, each transaction carefully structured to avoid federal reporting requirements. Vasquez's network included contacts at banks in Nevada, Arizona, and Oregon, institutions that wouldn't question large cash deposits from established business customers. The money would move through a series of transfers, each designed to create additional distance between the stolen currency and its original source. Within weeks, the $1.2 million would be distributed across dozens of accounts, converted into legitimate assets, and effectively laundered beyond the reach of federal investigators. After completing the transfer, Castellanos returned to his normal routine. He loaded his cleaning cart into the Valley Maintenance Services van and drove to the company's storage facility, where he completed his end-of-shift procedures exactly as he had every night for over a year. He filled out his work log, secured his equipment, and left no indication that anything unusual had occurred during his shift. The genius of the operation lay not in its complexity, but in its simplicity. No alarms had been triggered, no security protocols had been obviously breached, and no physical evidence had been left behind in the areas where the theft occurred. The electromagnetic pulse device had functioned perfectly, leaving no trace of its use. The time-locked safes had been resealed using their own mechanisms, creating the appearance that they had never been opened. Even the currency storage areas showed no obvious signs of disturbance. Most importantly, the theft had been designed to avoid immediate detection. The missing money represented only a fraction of the total currency held in the facility, and the specific bundles that had been taken were selected to create minimal visual disruption to the storage arrays. In the chaos of daily operations, with money constantly arriving and departing, the discrepancy might not be noticed for days or even weeks. This delay was crucial to the success of the laundering operation. By the time federal auditors discovered the shortage, the stolen currency would already be moving through Vasquez's network, converted into forms that would be nearly impossible to trace. The longer the theft went undetected, the more time the conspirators had to distance themselves from the crime and establish alibis that would make prosecution difficult, even if they were eventually identified. Marcus Webb, the third member of the conspiracy, had remained completely separate from the night's activities. His role had been completed weeks earlier, when he provided the technical expertise and equipment needed to bypass the building's security systems. He had no direct involvement in the actual theft and maintained no ongoing contact with his co-conspirators, a deliberate isolation that protected all three members of the team from exposure if any single element of the operation failed. The plan included provisions for this separation to continue indefinitely. None of the conspirators would contact the others or attempt to coordinate future activities. Each would return to their normal lives and maintain the routines that had provided cover for their criminal enterprise. Castellanos would continue working as a janitor, Vasquez would operate her import-export business, and Webb would pursue legitimate employment in the security industry. This disciplined approach to post-crime behavior was perhaps the most sophisticated aspect of the entire operation. Many criminal enterprises fail not because of flaws in their execution, but because of mistakes made afterward, when success breeds overconfidence and conspirators begin taking risks that ultimately expose their activities. The Sacramento operation was designed to avoid these pitfalls through absolute separation and rigid adherence to predetermined protocols. As dawn broke over Sacramento on March 16, 1985, the Federal Reserve Processing Center appeared exactly as it had the night before. The same security measures remained in place. The same personnel reported for duty, and the same routine operations resumed without interruption. The theft had been so carefully executed that even the victims remained unaware that a crime had occurred. It would be several days before federal auditors discovered the discrepancy in the currency counts, and even then, the initial assumption was that the shortage resulted from accounting errors rather than theft. The possibility that someone had successfully penetrated the building's security systems and accessed time-locked safes seemed so unlikely that investigators initially focused on internal procedures and documentation rather than criminal activity. This delay provided exactly the cover that Castellanos and his co-conspirators had anticipated. While federal agents slowly recognized that they were dealing with a sophisticated theft, the stolen money was already being transformed into legitimate assets through Vasquez's laundering network. The trail was growing colder by the hour, and the evidence that might have led to arrests was being systematically eliminated through careful financial maneuvering. But in his supply closet time capsule, sealed behind stacks of maintenance supplies and hidden within the building's own infrastructure, Castellanos had left something that would eventually tell the complete story. The metal container held not just documents detailing the operation, but physical evidence that would link all three conspirators to the crime. It was his insurance policy against betrayal, but it would also become the key that unlocked a mystery that had puzzled investigators for 3 decades. The investigation that followed was a masterclass in federal incompetence. By the time auditors confirmed that $2.8 million was actually missing, not misplaced, the trail had gone completely cold. FBI agents interviewed every employee who had accessed the building during the previous month, but their focus remained on federal personnel and armored car crews. The possibility that a contract janitor could have orchestrated such a sophisticated operation never seriously entered their calculations. Castellanos continued reporting to work as if nothing had changed. His cleaning logs remained detailed and professional, his interactions with security guards stayed routine, and his performance evaluations showed no decline in quality or reliability. To everyone who knew him, he remained the same dependable maintenance worker he had always been. The transformation from honest employee to federal criminal was invisible, hidden beneath layers of careful planning and disciplined execution. Federal investigators spent months pursuing leads that led nowhere. They examined the building's security footage, but the cameras had recorded nothing unusual during the critical hours. They analyzed the electromagnetic signatures from the breached safes, but found no evidence of tampering or forced entry. They interviewed dozens of current and former employees, but uncovered no credible suspects or motives. The case file grew thick with reports and theories, but produced no arrests or meaningful progress. Meanwhile, Elena Vasquez's laundering operation proceeded exactly as planned. The stolen currency moved through her network in carefully structured transactions, each designed to appear legitimate to banking authorities. Within 6 months, the money had been converted into real estate investments, business equipment purchases, and offshore account deposits that created an impenetrable barrier between the original theft and its ultimate destination. The 3 conspirators maintained their agreement of absolute separation. They never met, never communicated, and never acknowledged their shared secret. Castellanos eventually left his job at the federal building and found work with another cleaning company. Vasquez expanded her import-export business, using the laundered proceeds to establish legitimate trade relationships that provided perfect cover for her criminal activities. Webb obtained employment with a private security firm, where his expertise in surveillance systems made him a valuable and trusted employee. For 30 years, their secret remained buried. The FBI case file was eventually transferred to cold case status, then archived as an unsolved federal crime. Insurance companies paid out claims totaling $2.8 million, writing off the loss as an unfortunate but isolated incident. The Federal Reserve Processing Center upgraded its security systems and implemented new protocols, but the improvements came too late to affect the investigation or prevent similar crimes. The building itself changed hands multiple times over the decades. The federal government eventually consolidated its operations and moved to a newer facility across town. The old building was sold to private developers, then resold to a demolition company when renovation costs proved prohibitive. By 2015, it was scheduled for complete destruction to make way for a shopping complex. Construction crews began the demolition process without any knowledge of the building's criminal history. They worked systematically through each floor, salvaging valuable materials and preparing the structure for controlled demolition. It was routine work, the kind of job that paid well but offered little excitement or surprise, until they reached the second-floor supply closet. The metal container had remained exactly where Castellanos placed it 3 decades earlier. protected by stacks of maintenance supplies and the simple fact that no one had any reason to disturb such an unremarkable storage area. When workers moved the boxes to access electrical wiring, they discovered the sealed container wedged behind a support beam, corroded by time but still intact. Inside, they found documents that read like a confession, detailing every aspect of the 1985 theft from initial planning to final execution. Castellanos had documented the names of his co-conspirators, the methods used to breach security, and the locations where portions of the stolen money had been hidden. He had even included photographs of the currency storage areas and diagrams showing the building's security vulnerabilities. But more than just documentation, the container held physical evidence that linked all three conspirators to the crime. There were samples of the electromagnetic pulse device, fragments of the modified cleaning containers, and even currency serial numbers that matched federal records from the original theft. It was a complete archive of criminal activity, preserved in perfect detail for 3 decades. The discovery reignited the investigation immediately. Sacramento police contacted the FBI, who reopened the case file and began tracking down the individuals named in Castellanos' hidden confession. What they found was a trail that had been cold for 30 years, but suddenly blazed with new evidence and fresh leads. Robert Castellanos had died in 2003, taking his secrets to the grave without ever being charged or even questioned about the federal theft. But his confession provided investigators with everything they needed to pursue the surviving conspirators and recover assets that had been purchased with stolen federal currency. Elena Vasquez was arrested at her import-export business, now a multi-million-dollar operation that had grown substantially since 1985. Federal agents seized her financial records and discovered a complex web of transactions that could be traced directly back to the original theft. Though much of the money had been laundered beyond recovery, investigators identified properties and investments worth over $1.2 million that had been purchased with the stolen federal currency. Marcus Webb proved more elusive. He had changed his name twice since 1985 and moved to Oregon, where he operated a small electronics repair shop. When federal agents finally located him, they found a man who had lived quietly for decades, maintaining a low profile and avoiding any activity that might attract law enforcement attention. The evidence against him was overwhelming, documented in detail within Castellanos' time capsule confession. Both surviving conspirators were charged with federal theft, money laundering, and conspiracy. The cases never went to trial. Faced with irrefutable evidence from their former partner's detailed confession, both accepted plea agreements that resulted in prison sentences and the forfeiture of assets purchased with stolen money. The recovered evidence also revealed the locations of the other money caches that Castellanos had described in his hidden documents. Federal agents found the basement hiding spot exactly where his confession indicated it would be, though the hollow wall space was empty. The money had been retrieved years earlier, probably by Castellanos himself when he felt it was safe to do so. The supply closet time capsule had served its purpose perfectly, preserving the truth long enough for justice to finally catch up with a crime that had seemed impossible to solve. What Castellanos intended as insurance against betrayal became the very evidence that exposed his co-conspirators and brought their 30-year secret into the light. The case closed with a resolution that few thought possible. A perfect crime, executed with precision and concealed through discipline, had finally been undone by the very man who planned it. In trying to protect himself from his partners, Robert Castellanos had left behind the key that would eventually unlock the mystery he had worked so hard to create. The moral of the story wasn't lost on federal investigators. No crime is truly perfect. No secret stays buried forever. And sometimes the most sophisticated criminals are undone by their own precautions. The janitor who walked away with $2.8 million had planned for every contingency except one. that his own insurance policy would become the evidence that brought down the entire operation. Today, the shopping complex stands where the federal building once operated, and few people know about the extraordinary crime that was planned and executed within those walls. But in the FBI archives, the case file tells a different story, one of meticulous planning, flawless execution, and the inevitable triumph of evidence over time.